I speak in the name of the one whose birthday we celebrate. Amen. It is with a huge sense of relief that I tumble into Christmas, not just because of the celebrations, not just for it coming at the turn of the year, not just because it comes at the end of a long, hard stint since the summer, but because of what God gives us Christmas after Christmas, year after year. The gift of real hope in the midst of a world of confusion and indeed of darkness. One 5th century pope called this the birthday of life. It is for me the birthday of reality, the birthday of meaning, the birthday of purpose. Christmas is when goodness and truth are born, because God has become among us, and we know truly who God is and who we are. I don't think I felt this so keenly before as I do this year. I feel acutely our urgent need, the world's urgent need for real hope and for truth and goodness in a way that I cannot remember feeling before. Let me give you an image. The Gatwick shut down. I've been haunted by this. I think because of what, to me, it represents for our world, what it says to us, about us. And it catches something deep in our human condition and points me mysteriously to why we are here today. Sightings of a dark, indistinct spot in the sky, and 140,000 people are stranded and increasingly distressed, frustrated, anxious, angry, trapped. They feel abandoned. No one is telling them anything. There seems to be nowhere to turn. Families are separated, people not able to meet up with loved ones, plans gone awry. People cowed and controlled by a dark, indistinct spot in the sky. No direction, mounting pressure, and underneath a seeping fear. Our world. It was just for a couple of days, but the signs of strain were there, and you wonder what would have happened if it had gone on much longer. Human beings under strain, when their options are limited and they feel powerless, can resort to terrifying and destructive behavior. Passive for a while, but then the tinder is ignited. Echoes of Animal Farm. Life in fear. And it's not just those who were trapped that seemed powerless. Those with responsibility, those with resources to tackle the challenge, seem stymied too, even to the point of suggesting it was never there, and arresting and exposing two wrong people. Actions shaped by fear. That may be Gatwick and a drone, but it is not just Gatwick and a drone. It is so much of our world right now. It's so much of our human condition. Human beings under strain when their options are limited resort to terrible and destructive behaviour. We've only to glance at what is going on politically here and across the Atlantic to see that. Political systems committed to openness and reason, trapped by ideologies and their grab for power, and their inevitable companion, fear. We can trace these patterns through history. We can trace them in our own experience. Human beings trapped in our own worlds, not knowing where to turn, what's going to happen, and then start to lash out one way or another, sooner or later turning on one another and those unable to protect themselves. Who suffers? Who suffers in societies that have lost their way? Jesus was very clear about this in his words and his actions. The poorest suffer, the sick suffer, the marginalized, the young, the elderly, the stranger, the refugee, the immigrant, the different suffer. Targets for neglect or targets for anger, they suffer. And we all suffer as the humanity we share is demeaned. That one dark, indistinct spot in the sky that causes us to live as if we are trapped, that has us cowed and controls us, we call sin. We are mesmerized by its message. It's hard to decipher, yet it's strangely compelling. It is that state that removes hope from our horizon, that keeps us thinking that we have to be our own answer to our own questions. We have to be our own explanation. We have to be self-made, with all meaning and value and purpose worked out for ourselves. And as for a creator, just a chance chemical event. We may live this life well. It seems to work for many much of the time. But then something happens. A Gatwick happens. And we realize that things aren't right. Fear seeps in. The Creator looks on us in pity and mercy. He's tried mitigation, to use the language of Gatwick, sent successions of mitigators, called them prophets, one after the other, but to no lasting effect. Their messages of turning back to God and practicing justice, of living lives of social mutuality, were forgotten or ignored almost as soon as they were uttered. Long ago, we're reminded in our first reading, God spoke to our ancestors in many and various ways by the prophets. And so instead, in ways that we struggle to find words for, the Creator becomes among us. What John's Gospel calls the Word, the creative agency of God, through whom everything exists, becomes among us, one of us. The Word becomes flesh and lives among us. And this for me is the extraordinary gift that makes hope real, that gives shape and meaning, that makes this the birthday of life and hope. It is there in the great opening of John's Gospel and in the opening of the letter to the Hebrews that we've just heard. When we think of Jesus, we think not just of a human being who somehow reflects the divine or is oddly filled with the divine, as if there were a space for that to happen. When we think of Jesus, we're brought face to face with the reality of the one coming among us who is the force of all life and of all creation, the source of order, of the whole universe, manifest in a human being in our history. The letter to the Hebrews tells us he is the reflection of God's glory, the exact imprint of God's very being, and he sustains all things. And from John, without him was not anything made that was made. Jesus is, in ways we can barely grasp, the source of everything, the birthday of life and hope. This is what we celebrate, this year as every year, this year perhaps more than ever before. This is not just about responding to a newborn, though it is that, of course. We realize the immensity of who this little one is. We celebrate the hope that lifts us out of our trapped Gatwick world. And we celebrate too, because this is the one who will show us how to live, who will bring the order of the universe to our disordered world. He will show us how to live with one another, to love our neighbours, to handle power and wealth, to order society, to focus on the needs of the poor, to work for justice. And as the source of creation, he will show us how to care for the world and our environment, created through him. The birth of life is the birth of those ways that overcome our fear, that lift us out and into action, to live the way he lives for us, to live the way of mercy and pity, of compassion and justice. And that indistinct spot in the sky, that source of our human disease, our disorientation, our distress, our fear, is still there, but it has no power, and it cannot control us unless we choose to give it power. Instead, we turn and we face the one who has come among us, born among us, Jesus Christ, by whom the universe comes into being and by whom we have life. This is the birthday